welcome to episode 231 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Reid Ramsey
and Dylan Moore.
And in today's episode, we will be talking about movies that we saw this week in part 1. And in part 2, we will be talking about 1994's The Legend of Drunken Master, or Drunken Master 2, however you want to go by it. Whatever your preference is. It has 2 titles, so we'll go with that. But let's go ahead and jump into movies that we saw this week. Dylan, you saw really a classic of the cinema. We've talked about a lot of Chaplin movies on this podcast, but we have not talked about this one, which I feel like is probably the most talked about of all of his movies, and that is City Lights. So I guess you just watched it recently. Talk a little bit about that one.
Yeah, I rewatched this one. I don't remember when the first time I saw it, and I honestly can't tell you why I decided to get it from the library again, outside of I just felt like it. And boy, it's like such a consolidation of Chaplin's concerns with his silent movies up until this point, and the fact that it's like a last hurrah for silent cinema as he understood it before it became, the 30s, talking cinema and screwball comedies and all that. So this one came out in 1931. And it opens with like a poke in the eye to to synchronized sound, where his tramp character is just lounging on a statue that's supposed to be inaugurated, and the ribbon cut for it, that it's like a peace and prosperity statue, and they are like, the whole audience that's there to celebrate this event is super pissed that he just this tramp is just sleeping on the statue, just snoozing away, and they're giving these grandstanding speeches and how excited they are, but all of it is synced to like what amounts to Charlie Brown parent talk. So it's a lot of wah 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 wahs and fuzzy tin can noise. And it basically plays that until it just goes into the same kind of silent movie intertitles for the rest of the film. I don't know what to do to recommend this or to talk about this, considering the other Chaplins that we've talked about before. I mean, this one's like 87 minutes solid movie that is a rags to riches to rags story, but he doesn't actually get any money. He just pretends he has money by basically becoming friends with a millionaire who only recognizes him when he's drunk. And he falls for this blind florist girl who's like barely scraping by with her grandmother, and so she's blind, and at one point, like, the sympathy and this kind of platonic love for this woman reaches a peak point where he just like, I have to find a way. Once he sees the newspaper clipping of Austrian doctor finds cure for blindness, and it's like that's becomes the tipping point at the back half of the movie, where he loses his job as a poop sweeper and tries to get money with boxing, and he also fails at that. And it's, I don't know, it's so old now at this point that it's like, to say I'm spoiling it is stupid, but
no, that's an outrageous. What was it made in 1920?
31 even. I mean, it's like right at the tail end of silent cinema of a certain vein. So, but there's
Well, it's one that I kind of we'll get to it in the second part of this episode, but you mentioned the boxing sequence in City Lights, and I feel like the physicality on display by Chaplin in that scene really mimics the kind of fighting style that Jackie Chan does in this film, in The Legend of Drunken Master, because it seems much more like the punches in his previous movies, at least Jackie Chan's movies, have been much more like, you feel the intensity, you feel the fervor of like the different punches and the different hits that he takes. It feels much more physical, and that kind of that feels more in line with like Buster Keaton, where you can just feel the hits being taken. And this one, it feels much more like,
Okay.
I guess for lack of a better word, flexible, and that seems more in line with what Chaplin's doing, especially in that boxing sequence. I don't know. Do you see that a little bit?
I can get behind that. I mean, most of the time, I agree about the Buster Keaton point where Chan seems to like really take a lot of his take the pain inspiration from him. But right, the conceit of the Drunken Master or whatever is that the style is like infinitely flexible and adaptable, and like that is the Tramp's MO. And there's like a way to find a parallel with like the Tramp character's complete ignorance of being able to get by with just ridiculousness and seat of his pants adaptation. That I would agree. Even so far, like the running gags in Jackie Chan movies, for sure takes inspiration from that. I mean, there's a scene in City Lights where him and the millionaire, quoted in the titles, called The Eccentric Millionaire, where they get like really sloshed up and go to a dancing hall to basically dance off the fact that this dude is getting divorced or is cheated on or whatever. And there's the long scene of basically Chaplin eating what is that, a confetti string that he mistakes as spaghetti, and like gets into a fight because he mistakes what he sees as like a domestic abuse, like a dude like just hitting his wife, that is actually just like a dance number. That's really weird, but like he's drunk and pissed off that it's happening in front of him, and so he tries to defend her. It's a lot. So yeah, there's, to your point, Zach, there's something about ignorance and drunkenness and kind of stumbling forward that we're definitely going to talk about more in Drunken Master. So
well, it's like, with Keaton, and we've talked about it in the previous episodes, but with Keaton, like, I think that because I watched The General this past week on the big screen, and the thing that you feel with him less than like the movement is more, you like can feel the pressure and the hits that he's taking. Like you can just, like when he runs into something or when something hits him, you feel it. Like it just feels very physical. Right. And with Chaplin, I don't feel like you feel that at all. It's a very different degree of physicality when he goes about his comedy, and it's much more, like I said, he's fluid. He's kind of adapting to his surroundings. Right. And while Keaton kind of does that to an extent, Chaplin has this way of just kind of weaving around stuff, and he's never really engaging directly with anything. Like, I feel like Keaton, to an extent, could like square up with somebody and kind of fight. Yeah. But Chaplin never seems like he wants to actually fight, and that's why I compare it to Drunken Master, because in that way, Jackie Chan in that movie is engaging people in fights, but he's like, the way that the drunken boxing goes, it feels more like he's kind of working around the actual fighting motion, and that seems much more in tune with what Chaplin does. He's never really engaging in the fight. He's kind of moving around it and finding alternatives to engage with the people.
That's pretty funny, because Chaplin's Tramp character in the shorts early on is much more of like an aggressive asshole, I would say. Like he definitely like situates people to get into shit and to fall into gags a lot more readily, and I think he softens up quite a bit in City Lights, where he's infinitely more put upon and like barely scraping by. But to your point about kind of the differences in style between Chaplin and Keaton, that like Chaplin, when he's about to fall into something or barely avoid something, you're like, you're laughing because it's like by the skin of his teeth, and you're like, oh god, he just doesn't understand what he's about to fall into. But with Buster Keaton, you're like, oh shit, he's gonna die, don't do it. But so it's I'll look forward to talking more about this in the second part, because it you're right, it'll come up. That tension is really interesting, because Chan just really tries to ride both lines, right, to get his physical comedy across. So definitely.
Well, the City Lights is on the Criterion Collection, so I'm sure it's available at your local library or in some other fashion. But if you haven't seen that and you're Charlie Chaplin fan, I don't know what you're doing. There's that one is definitely the kind of go-to first one. It's a great
87 minutes
great entry point. Yeah, it's a very short one, but it's packed full of a lot of fantastic moments. Reid, I'm gonna toss it over to you. You watched truly an award-dominating film in The Tourist.
Yeah. Well, first off, I love that Charlie Chaplin movie. City Lights is my favorite, but I'm gonna go with a slightly less sophisticated choice for my movie tonight. But I watched The Tourist, which stars Johnny Depp and Angelina Jolie, and is directed by the German director Florian Henkel von Donnersmarck, who, the reason I watched this movie is because I really love his first movie, The Lives of Others, which is a German movie from 2006, I believe. But Donnersmarck, I don't want to say his full name every time, was recently put back into the headlines because his new movie got nominated for cinematography and best foreign language movie at the Oscars. So, and I'd never even heard of it. I think it's called Never Look Away. So it kind of snuck in out of nowhere, so I figured I could revisit some of his other movies. And it's so bizarre to me that he did this movie after The Lives of Others, because if you've seen that, that's like an espionage, Cold War, like, movie, and it's fascinating and heartbreaking. But he went instead on his second movie to make The Tourist, which is written by him and Christopher McQuarrie, actually, of Mission Impossible fame. But this movie I thought was honestly kind of fascinating. I didn't have high expectations because, as Zach alluded, it's not a particularly well thought of movie, but it did get nominated for several Golden Globes, so it's kind of that typical, like, kind of bad movie maybe that still slides into Golden Globes, but not like the type of bad movie like Bohemian Rhapsody or something. Anyways, but basically it tells a story of Angelina Jolie's character is dating this mob boss in Italy, and her boyfriend disappears and sends her a note telling her to choose a random person that's his height and his build on this train, and to pretend like he is him. He's the boyfriend, so that the FBI, or not the FBI, the people investigating, sorry, I watch too many American movies. The people investigating start to go after this guy, and this guy happens to be Johnny Depp, who's just a tourist on this train. But basically, this movie is just a really good vehicle for Angelina Jolie to wear these amazing dresses and look like Marlene Dietrich for 90 minutes or so, which I thought was wonderful. And it really has some good thrilling moments, and it's well directed still. It's a bizarre movie, but it is well directed, and it's fast paced, but it really is just kind of a mood piece for Angelina Jolie, which I personally appreciate, and I thought was like, I don't know, I posted to Twitter one of her dresses that it looks like straight out of 30s and 40s Hollywood, like these types of clothing that no one now ever wears in movies. And it's kind of the same deal with Johnny Depp. He's wearing a suit the entire time, like a few different suits. It's just like everyone is back 60, 70 years ago, acting as if none of the past half century has happened. And it's kind of fascinating for that reason. But I did really like this movie, and I would recommend it if you like watching Angelina Jolie. And if you kind of like Johnny Depp, it's a good performance by him, but I don't think he's ever really very good. So maybe it's a great performance if you really like Johnny Depp.
There you go. Yeah,
it's got some twists, but yeah. What?
It sounds pretty, that premise, to your point about it being reminiscent or homage to like 30s feelings, that sounds like that mistaken identity thing is right out of a screwball comedy premise, or, I mean, I know that happened more than once with that Ginger Roger and Fred Astaire kind of setup.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, so I would definitely recommend The Tourist.
Is it streaming anywhere?
I do not know. I picked it up at the library, so it's on DVD, and I'm assuming Blu-ray, but I don't know. I'm sure it's streaming on Amazon, but I can check.
So shout out to the local library. It's our unofficial sponsor.
Yeah, as it should.
It's true. Every week.
Well, I'm gonna talk about two movies. The first one is kind of a short, so I don't have too much to say about it. It played in front of the General when I saw it this past week, and it is a Hal Roach, Harold Lloyd short called Number Please. And I'm not a big Harold Lloyd fan. I've seen probably 3 or 4 of his films. He doesn't really do too much for me compared to Chaplin and Keaton and those guys. But this one, I could see the kind of everyman charm that he has. I'm trying to think that the ones previously I'd seen is like Safety Last and The Freshman. But this one, I think, plus being in kind of the shorter format, it's only about 25 minutes long, is much more effective. Harold Lloyd plays this guy who is at an amusement park and is trying to impress this girl. The girl is there with her boyfriend. And pretty much it's built around these various hijinks where he is trying to, at one point her dog gets loosed, and so he's trying to like save the dog before the boyfriend saves the dog in order to impress her. That naturally doesn't work out. Then you have this other whole setup where the girl's uncle, who is a balloonist, accepts them to go up into this hot air balloon, but he has the 2 passes, but he will only accept them if her mother approves that she can go up there. And and so he has to. So the 2 admirers have to like go and get the mother's consent. And you have this incredible sequence where the boyfriend starts running toward the mother's house, and Harold Lloyd realizes that he can use the phone, and he goes into this hotel to use the phone. And all of these people are using the various telephones.
Okay.
And so he's trying to find her number in the phone book while this one guy is looking at the phone book. And then 2 is trying to get into a phone booth in order to talk to them. And it's the way that they set up the different gags is really it's incredibly effective. Like, you have this one gag where Harold Lloyd is looking at the kind of funhouse mirrors at an amusement park and is getting thrown off by the way his body is shaped when he's looking into the mirror. So at one point he's incredibly tall. At one point he has like a very fat exterior, and it's kind of, he has this like confused look as if like this is how he actually is being portrayed. It's a very charming little film. Watching him try to woo this girl who is constantly throwing different hurdles in both him and the boyfriend's way is kind of charming. And the phone, like I said, the phone gag where he is trying to get into a phone booth is incredibly clever. And it kind of works into that, similar to like what Jackie Chan does, because I know Jackie Chan has mentioned Harold Lloyd as somebody who he admires, in that he kind of shares that thinking on his feet, where a lot of the gags are more, you have this large group of people trying to get into this one space, and the way that Harold Lloyd finagles his way into that small space ahead of everybody else is really the gag. And I think Jackie Chan kind of shares that with him. And so if you can check it out, Number Please, it's a very charming little short. It's easily my most favorite thing of Harold Lloyd's that he's done so far. The other movie I watched recently, I was going to talk about it last week, but we ran out of time, and that is All the President's Men, which, when I say I haven't watched that, and as somebody who works in journalism, it's an immediate like judgment point, and I just move on from that. It's just, it is. Right. They're just like, you haven't seen that? And I'm just like, yeah, there's like thousands and millions of movies that I haven't watched. And
do you really love the newspapers?
Do you still have your job? Exactly. So it's kind of like, All the President's Men, though, it's Alan J. Pacula, Robert Redford, Dustin Hoffman, William Goldman wrote the script. And it covers the story of the Washington Post reporters Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein as they start to uncover what becomes the Watergate scandal that takes down President Nixon. And I'll forego any relation to me working in a newsroom and this being a newsroom journalism movie, and just kind of really talk about its qualities as just a movie. Because outside of me enjoying that as kind of a journalist, I think that it's really enjoyable as just a movie. Like the way that it's set up, the way that it's constructed is so effective. It works as this thriller, which makes no sense because, one, you know the ending of the movie. You know how this turns out. Two, it's not like it's anything all that thrilling. Like, it's just process. It's the journalistic process. It's them trying to track down sources, trying to get sources on the record. It's all of this kind of process stuff that really, if you went to your local newspaper and watched the reporter do that, it's not that interesting. And granted, this is the Watergate scandal, so it is remarkably more interesting. But still, it's all of this kind of just minutia process stuff that's really not that engaging. In the way that Peculia, as well as and William Goldman writes it, like there's just incredible amount of intrigue and thrill to watching these two reporters kind of go through the motions, and they set it up in this way that you are constantly uncovering bits along with them. It's just so incredibly effective. I know a lot of people, when they talk about this movie, especially today, they like to kind of relate it to the prescience of the current administration and kind of the journalism that's being done now. But there's something much more enticing about watching this. I mean, it's in 1976. This is happening in the run-ups to the 1972 elections, and the analog quality of it adds to just that that kind of panache that this movie has. It's like I just thinking of how reporters today are taking in stories. The fact that how this information is being recorded is they're on the phone with somebody and they're writing down notes along the way, and that's the way that this information is being placed on the record, all based on their memory as they're trying to write down what this person is saying over the phone, is really remarkable. And I think that you have these two kind of these performances. You have this very sporadic performance from Dustin Hoffman as Carl Bernstein, in this much more measured, just almost like coiffed performance from Robert Redford. He's just so charming and
just talking about his hair
and suave. Yeah, exactly. It's just, oh my god. Like the fact that people that like in 1976, everybody didn't want to fuck Robert Redford. It just completely baffles me. He's so attractive in this movie. But it's just so, the way that Peculia places the camera, the way that it kind of just sits there and he lets the scene kind of develop. I think the scene that a lot of people kind of mention with this movie is at the final sequence, where you have the stationary camera. To the left of the frame, you have the inauguration of Richard Nixon. To the right of the frame, on the TV, and kind of on the right of the frame in the background, you have Woodward and Bernstein writing the story about the Watergate scandal. Is the one that people kind of latch onto. But there's a number of just kind of there's a remarkable amount of space in this movie that's utilized. It's a lot. It feels like I think that, and this kind of goes back to the tension of the movie, where you feel the tension in this film because you have this one character, whether it's Woodward or it's Bernstein or it's both of them. You have these characters who you're following, and they're usually going after one thing, whether it's a person, whether it's a building, wherever they're going. And it always feels like it's them in just this kind of and just incredible amount of of empty space that we don't like, that's just unknown. You have this unknown kind of ocean around them, and it's I think that's where just that uncertainty, that almost fear of what the repercussions of the paranoia of what could happen is what is so effective about this movie. And sure, it plays to the 2018, 2019, whatever you would like to say, political sphere, but I think also just on its own merit as just this paranoia movie. We talked about Marathon Man with Dustin Hoffman a couple weeks ago on our listener's choice, and I think this one is much more effective just because it's much more focused on the way it's kind of it's really working on you. It's much more understated. It's much more undercut the way it's kind of making you paranoid. It's not really as overt or as in your face as Marathon Man can be at times. And so All the President's Men, it's on Amazon Prime right now. I would recommend checking it out.
Give a plug to Gordon Willis' collaboration as the cinematographer on that movie, because to your point of like paranoid open spaces, I mean, right, the key kind of one of the key central images is inside that parking garage and them not being able to identify that their source, Deep Throat, and he's just covered in shadows, and you just get this bouncing echo of the parking garage, and just not sure what's around the corner or who happens to be watching. So yeah, that's big collaboration for that movie.
It's a kind of it's a type of movie that I would love to see. And I know people compare like Spotlight to it just because of the natural kinship with journalism, but it's the way that it captures unknown paranoia around you, I think, is such a natural fit for the kind of technology age that we live in. And I'd love to see kind of a movie that's able to harness that energy and that kind of type of paranoia in a film. Maybe there's some examples. Maybe right now I just can't think of any. But I would love to see taking something in the vein of All the President's Men, but using it in kind of a tech way, in the way that looking at Facebook or Google or Amazon and these large corporations, and the ways that they're watching you and taking note of you while you don't really recognize it. I don't know if that's as visually apparent as something in All the President's Men, but just something I was thinking about.
To your point, though, is like a lot of this movie is the suggestion of someone watching, right? I mean, in this case, talking about digital technology being like overt or even covertly present, but like here, to your point about these open spaces, it's like it's left to the imagination about what and how they're able to do it, right? I mean, the paranoia is with the lack of knowing, and so maybe even like that omnipresence, that panopticon, can be even more disturbingly suggested because of drones and whatever else, what have you. Ooh, so
exactly. But yeah, Amazon Prime, check it out. We're gonna take a short break, and we will be back with the Legend of Drunken Master after this.
Hey Cinematariats, this is your co-host Lydia Creech with an important message during this break in the show. Cinematary would like you to know that we do not want your money, and we don't want to place ads in the show at this time either. That's not why we do this. We do it because we enjoy each other's company, and we want to bring you our pure, unadulterated opinions on the world of cinema. However, there are a few things you can do to help out the show that we would greatly appreciate. First, leave us a review on iTunes, 4 or 5 stars only, to help us reach more listeners per the algorithm gods. Secondly, send us a tweet at Cinematary, or better yet, send us an email at zach@cinematary.com. That's Zach, Z-A-C-H, so we can hear from you guys for a change. I'd especially like to hear if you're a human and not an android who also likes Blade Runner, or maybe you have a suggestion of a movie you would really like to hear our opinions on. Regardless, let us know your thoughts and we will read them out and respond to them on future episodes of the show. Finally, please share the show with friends and members of your family who you think would enjoy listening to and participating in our film discussions that we bring to you guys every week. So, to recap, review, send us your thoughts through Twitter and email, and please share with your friends and family. We would greatly appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Now back to the show.
Episode 231 of Cinematary. In this part, we will be continuing our Jackie Chan series with 1994's The Legend of Drunken Master. It's directed by Lau Kar-leung, with uncredited work by Jackie Chan as a director, and a script by Edward Tang, Eric Zhang, and Barbie Tung. The film stars Jackie Chan, Anita Mui, T. Lung, Ken Lo, and Felix Wong. And
the director has a part, right?
He does. I love this logline, though. From a land where honor and tradition reign comes the legend of a martial arts hero unlike any other, the Drunken Master, who can turn just one drink into devastation and humiliation for his enemies. His technique is fast, furious, and powerfully funny. The film is a sequel to Chan's 1978 film Drunken Master, directed by Yuen Wu Ping. Another film, Drunken Master 3, which came also out in 1994 and was directed by the same one as The Legend of Drunken Master, features little in common with either this or its predecessor and is not considered a sequel. In 2005, Drunken Master 2 was named one of the top 100 best films of all time by Time magazine, and in 2015, the BFI selected Drunken Master 2 as one of the 10 best action movies of all time. The film was directed by Lau Kar-leung, although Jackie Chan is credited with directing the final fight scene. The villain in the scene is played by Ken Lo, a Jackie Chan stunt team member and Chan's former personal bodyguard, which sounds hilarious, being the personal bodyguard of Jackie Chan. The action direction was by Lau Kar-leung in cooperation with the Jackie Chan stunt team. Of all the films in Chan's back catalog that received North American theatrical distribution, Drunken Master 2 was cut the least. A scene in which Wong drunkenly sings at a cafe was recut slightly, making use of a few alternative takes not seen in the original Cantonese version. In addition, a 35-second cut was made to the concluding scene of the film, which shows Wong blinded and mentally crippled as a result of drinking industrial alcohol during the film's ultimate fight. Played for laughs, the scene was considered to be in bad taste by the American distributor Dimension Films. In addition to the cut, however, there were other significant changes made to the U.S. release, including the change of the title to Legend of Drunken Master, an English-language dub, dubbed by Jackie Chan himself, and a new musical score. The redubbed soundtrack also meant that sound effects were different in some instances, completely altering the rhythm of the fight sequences. The English dub also makes references to animal kung fu styles such as Drunken Monkey, as well as made-up names for random moves during the first two instances that Wong Fai-hung uses drunken boxing. The original dialogue referenced the 8 Drunken Immortals technique, which was also featured in Drunken Master in 1978, based on the real-life Taoist style of Drunken Fist. The change was most likely done to compensate for the general Western audience's unfamiliarity with Chinese mythology as well as the preceding film. Drunken boxing is a general term for all styles of Chinese martial arts that imitate the movements of a drunk person. It is an ancient style, and its origins are mainly traced back to the famous Buddhist and Taoist sects. The Buddhist style is related to the Shaolin Temple, while the Taoist style is based on the Taoist tale of the Drunken 8 Immortals. Zui Quan has the most unusual body movements among all styles of Chinese martial arts. Hitting, grappling, locking, dodging, feinting, ground and aerial fighting, and all other sophisticated methods of combat are incorporated. The earliest written reference to drunken boxing is probably in the classic novel Water Margin, in which the Song Dynasty rebel Wu Song is depicted as a master of drunken boxing. When detailing the various styles of drunken boxing, it is useful to observe that drunken boxing is not a single martial art with an established lineage and hierarchy, but rather a group of loosely related kung fu styles. In this respect, drunken boxing could also be understood as a phenomenon within kung fu. Furthermore, drunken boxing rarely appears as a complete and independent system, and rather as an advanced feature within a broader system. In 2000, which was the release in the US for this film, Entertainment Weekly said a half dozen years after its Asian release and over 2 decades after the original Drunken Master made Jackie Chan a star in Hong Kong, the Legend of Drunken Master may be the most kick-ass demonstration yet for the majority of American moviegoers of what the fuss is all about. To many aficionados who know the video as Drunken Master 2, this 1994 favorite remastered and dubbed in classic bad Chinese accented English showcased Chan in his impish glory, dazzling in his ability to make serious, complicated fighting look like devil-may-care fun. In 2000, Time magazine said the most important and entertaining star of East Asian cinema, Jackie Chan survived a boyhood in a punishing Peking opera school in his early screen days as the, quote, next Bruce Lee to create his own genre of martial arts comedies. Jackie starred in and directed many wonderful action films in his pre-Hollywood days. This one can stand at the peak. In 2000, Roger Ebert said, Jackie Chan's The Legend of Drunken Master is quite simply amazing and involves some of the most intricate, difficult, and joyfully executed action sequences I have ever seen. When I did a seminar at the Hawaiian Film Festival several years ago, comparing the physical comedy of Chan and Buster Keaton, martial arts fans brought in their bootleg Hong Kong laser discs of this film and told me that I had to see the final 20 minutes fight sequences. That was correct. Coming at the end of the film, filled with jaw-dropping action scenes, this extended virtuoso effort sets some kind of benchmark. It may not be possible to film a better fight sequence. On that note, let's talk a little bit about The Legend of Drunken Master. I was telling Reid before we were recording that, yes, this is a sequel to a original film, but that you have no way of knowing because Netflix just kind of presents this as a standalone movie.
Well, I mean, even to the retitling for the American release, it kind of undercuts the fact that was presented as a sequel, right? Originally,
exactly. So. But at the same time, I feel like this movie you can kind of come in cold and be fine with it.
Yeah.
Sure. It's funny. The last 2 movies, I feel like I've talked a little bit too long about, and made an idiot of myself talking about how the plot of these movies make no sense, and I recognize that. Like, it is part of the fun in it. It makes no sense, but I don't see that as a detriment to these movies. It's incredibly fun because of that. This movie makes absolutely no sense. Like, in the other 2 movies, there was a part where the actual plot took off. I don't think the plot of this movie really ever takes off until later in the film when one of the characters dies. But this movie is just like complete utter nonsense, and it's deeply entertaining just because these different characters are so wildly just insane at times. Especially, I love Jackie Chan's character's stepmom because she is just constantly just
so
digging in this stuff. But compared to some of the other
just
Jackie,
one-ups his comedy
exactly. And so it's kind of comparing it to some of the other Jackie Chan movies. What do you all make of Legend of Drunken Master?
Well, I think it's better for it not making sense because you learn pretty early on that you can kind of check out of the plot and not worry about that. And like that's the case with a lot of Kung Fu and Jackie Chan movies, which is really nice, honestly. But you even get the sense that like things just happen, and a lot of the joy in this is like when the stepmom character Anita Mui, who is amazing in this movie, when she's standing aside during this one fight scene and she's just instigating it. She's literally throwing wine to Jackie Chan so he can drink it and do the Drunken Master. Like Zach said off mic, she's activating his like abilities, but like that's part of the fun is like we get to be almost in her position, just like letting things just amp up and get instigated, and for whatever reason like no one knows why they're fighting, and it's kind of wonderful because of that.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure if I agree with all of it. I mean, the plot is definitely set off by what amounts to a MacGuffin, right? But I think because of that, in this case, much like even, you know, where the word gets bounced around a lot in Hitchcock movies as a thriller, that this sets off like the absurd relation between the British colonists and the main characters of this movie, right? I mean, it starts off with a hot swap of a jade stamp or whatever that's supposed to be going into the British Museum collection, and some ginseng because they mistakenly have it in two different white wrapped boxes, right? Or yellow wrapped boxes. I mean, and it is a MacGuffin, but like it helps point out this dynamic of economic exchange, right? That like, sure, you can kind of turn your brain off because, you know, you're mainly here for the crazy fight scenes, but technically by the story and the situations of this movie, those things actually set off hostilities between these people. I mean, and to the point that it like there's a land territory dispute, like just because the British guy who lives next door to Fei Hong's father's school, Jackie Chan's character's father's school, that like he's pissed that they're so noisy, so he's wanting to find a way to get them to sell the property so he can just have, you know, peace of mind. I mean, it's secondary or it's on the periphery, but I mean, I don't know if this movie would work without like reasons for fighting, right? Like,
oh no, you're
Okay.
absolutely right. Like,
Okay.
I think when I'm saying it doesn't, there's no reason for the fighting. I mean, if in the opening, one of the opening scenes, Fei Hong, when the swap happens and there's the mishap, he gets in a fight with who we figure out is a master of martial arts. And at one point, the master calls him a traitor during this fight. And that's what offends Jackie, and that's the reason he keeps fighting. And then, like, you realize that's the only reason he's been fighting. But then, like, you're right. It becomes sort of like a conversation about honor and, like, Chinese identity and stuff like that. And that is, you can't disregard, like, the colonialism aspect of this movie. It's so prevalent, and it's so important to the movie.
And that's the director, right? That's actually him playing the
Oh, is it
master,
really?
Master Fu, I think, or is
Okay.
what the subtitles refer to him as. So, yeah, so like even another layer of, I don't know if you want to talk about like meta characters or narratives, but there's a thing in there
Yeah.
as hidden. But I mean, to your point, though, Zach, like, you know, the idea of it being nonsense is like not too hard to knock. Just
No, like it's not a bad thing.
just
It's-
because
it's-
to your point that it's like a reason for these things to happen.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, a lot of the hostilities are kind of built on nonsense.
Well,
so I don't know.
Well, there's nonsense happening, but at least
Yeah.
you do establish like character dynamics. Like by the time the quote plot kicks in, you understand the tension between Fei Hong and his father, and you understand like that there's this kind of strange colonialism subplot happening, and
It's the British Museum's fault. Clearly, they just want all the shit.
there's all this stuff happening kind of in the periphery while the nonsense is happening, and then it becomes much more paramount, and you're like, oh, I kind of forgot that was actually something that was happening, and that's kind of what throws you off, is like all of this stuff is happening and you're not sure what you should be paying attention to and what is just kind of there for the fun of it, and so I guess that's kind of what my point is.
So I mean, to that point too, that it is to think about Jackie Chan's movies that he either directs or definitely the ones that we've watched that he starred in, is that there's that line of the intense fighting sequences and the comedy that's built inside of it, right? So it's like we're supposed to laugh and kind of not care because it's so ridiculous, but yet a lot of the seedbed of the story is like, that's kind of some for real shit and not really funny, but yet here we are laughing at Jackie Chan and the characters around him more or less just going for it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this movie especially shows like two very different sides of Jackie Chan. Like you have, for at least 90% of the movie, maybe the most, or like the funniest he can be, and just like he looks like he's having the time of his life, like smiling constantly. He looks like he's just having a blast, and he does in a lot of his movies, but especially here, I think. And then you have the last 15 minutes of this movie that is just brutal. Like the action scenes that Zach, you said he choreographed himself, like that is all brutal. Like he catches on fire multiple times.
Multiple times.
It's just
oh
like,
my God.
Yeah, like he's drinking industrial alcohol. Like it is hard to watch. So you get kind of both sides of this very violent but also very funny Jackie Chan, I think.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about that final fight, and I guess we can go ahead and just jump into it now, because I was thinking about it compared to a fight that we talked a lot about in the first episode of the series, which was the one between Benny the Jet and Jackie Chan in Wheels on Meals, which is much more physical. Like you can feel the punches. It feels like every hit you can feel the kind of pressure being placed on the different actors as they're kind of taking part in this sequence. And with this one, you don't feel that as much, but you can see the kind of the small technical points that you can tell that Jackie wanted the hand the hand to hit here, the leg to hit here. You can feel all of those. It feels so pinpointed where each hit is taking place, and that's just, to me, was just remarkable watching it, and much more impressive just because you can just tell the real craftsmanship, and this is how I want this fight illustrated, and it feels much more tactile than the other one did. It's kind of night and day between that fight and Wheels on Meals and this one, but this one to me was just much more impressive and kind of elevated the movie because of it. What did you guys make of that final fight?
Yeah, to your point that I mean, it's the difference between fighting in a fancy mansion and in a fucking factory that's basically a version of hell on earth is, I mean, that's right. I mean, there's no way that he could have pulled this off without careful precision because of all the machinery that he tries to incorporate into the fight sequence. Right? You got like these heavy smelting cylinders that are just constantly about to slam him, and characters trying to fight him with chains that are on fire, and and just that industrial alcohol or whatever just being thrown at him like a flamethrower. It's just the danger of just literally being in the environment that's around you is so much more heightened, and as you said, Zach, tactile, and just on the edge of he's probably going to die here, but so just the stakes, I guess, is a way to phrase that, is that it's so much immediately palpable than fighting in a mansion.
Yeah, and y'all saying all of that, like, especially what you're saying, Zach, reminds me of the moment when, like, I feel like a good example of how choreographed this is. Reminds me of the moment when he is just, like, gearing up for this kick as the villain is on the ground, and his leg just goes, like, from the knee down, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And, like, you hear the noise, and it's really intense, and then, like, it freezes, and then he kicks him. And it's just, like, it's all this show leading up to this moment, but, like, all that led up to it is not that important. It's just the kick, but the fun and the actual, like, entertainment is in the show. But it is, like, a brutal environment, and it has to do, like, maybe that's where a lot of the colonialism is. I think it is. I think it's making a case here, too, is, like, he's entered, like, labor conditions here, where people are working in this factory, and the conditions are awful. And, like, it's controlled by these sneering British dudes that are the most British dudes you'll ever see. And it's hysterical, but, like, that it's in itself is interesting, but then that he uses this environment to actually, like, be victorious over these people is interesting in itself, too.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm just really being thrown off by thinking about him just being that, playing stone cold, like, drunk on industrial alcohol. Like, his face seems like it's on fire while he's just stumbling around kicking this dude's ass. It's so much. That character, I think, there seems to be a suggestion of him not only, like, being a complicit with the British, but I mean, he seems like he's fighting with Taekwondo, and there's like the area that it seems like the movie's set in, Manchuria, that's kind of more northern or northeast China, where a lot of colonizing, and particularly Japanese colonizing later, but that it seems like these characters are intentionally identified as foreign, even so far as this difference in fighting style, right? Like, this guy is a really tall dude, he has long legs, and he just happens to I do a version of Taekwondo, I guess. Yes, right, particularly identifiers wearing a suit, while Jackie is in that kind of more I don't know how to describe the cloth getup that he's in. I mean, he's more identified with the people in the village that he's in, right? I don't know the particular name for the suit, but that those signifiers clashing in that fight, and how, like, to Zach's point in our conversation about this kind of adapting fighting style, that the drunken styles, to even your information sheet saying that, like, it is a part of this kind of Chinese boxing, but it's like a feature of it. It's just kind of cobbled together by these kind of figures as opposed to a hard-edged school, it seems like, right? And so it's like there's this fluidity that's trying to be showcased, to read even the example that you brought up of that dude, like, doing this flashy leg movement, is like, you're being an idiot, I'm just going to show you what you were doing and then kick you with it. So it's, yeah, there's a weird back to even like a colonialist dynamic being like literally fought inside this space that, you know, on some level you can kind of put into the background, but it's like put so much to the fore with like literally being in this hellscape of a factory that it's surprising and kind of hard not to notice.
Yeah, it's completely difficult not to notice just kind of that aspect of the movie, because you have and especially like you were saying, like the kind of fighting style of the quote kind of villains of this movie feel much more regimented than what Jackie's doing, and that feels much because the drunken boxing is so, like we've said, very fluid and adaptable, but it feels much more in line with like the much more regimented style that you see in the movies that we've already talked about in this series, like Wheels on Meals and Police Story, which feel like a very set in place style, while this one is just is really working with how his body is flowing around as these other people kind of fight around him.
Which, I mean, is funny considering like both of those movies are set after, you know, historically, theoretically, than this movie's set, right? I mean, they're contemporary in a way that this one is like a hearkening back. I mean, even to, you know, this being a sequel to the movie Drunken Master, but like this kind of local style of fighting that gets changed in a different direction with, you know, militarization against the West or whatever, that it just becomes something else. I mean, now in action movies, we just get this massive agglomeration of all these fighting styles that it basically is like, we point to MMA fighting, right? That it's just like, whatever that means, it's just that. Now, I mean, to be fair, you can point it out that different techniques at different moments, but like there's a like a certain whatever nationalist pride, I guess, being like put on display here, that this is it, and it almost to the point that it's even silly and undercutting it because it's a Drunken Master style, right? Like there's this person who's being ridiculous in front of you, but it's completely like unwieldy, unstable, but powerful in its fluidity, that it's allowed to be both, right? Even though to the point I think that brings up that we haven't really talked about, that's the family dynamics in this movie. We don't have to go too far down the road. I mean, if anything else, just want to talk about the stepmom some more. But the thing about this weird patriarch character, right? His father disowning him, blah, 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 like because he's using the style that he's been condemned not to use out, or at least particularly out in public and showing it off, even though that seems like it's the forbidden style or like secret one that like not everybody knows, or that's, you know, his dad's worry of him becoming an alcoholic, because once you go down that road that you can't actually control it, you just think you can, and so like it leads people astray thinking that they actually can, you know, control this powerful technique or whatever. That is, goes right back to the more like overblown version of it in the first movie, where like his dad actually sends him off to be disciplined by the drunken master because he's so hardcore, which is ridiculous considering, you know, he's a goofy old man, but right, that part of that dichotomy, that joking dialectic or whatever. But I just want to go back to, though, talking about the stepmom, because like she does so much good for this movie's comedy, and to undercut the dad, that he's not sidelined, but the focus on her like getting away with shit underneath his like watchful gaze or whatever. Particularly the first time we meet her, right, is like her with her friends playing mahjong, and then as soon as they hear that the master, you know, the dad, shows back up, that they she immediately goes back to as if she's taking care of them, and it like the most portrait painterly way, where it's just completely contrived, but because of it's hilarious that they're getting away with it. And of course Jackie Fei Hong is in on it. It's like, oh, you've been playing mahjong again. But so what I just because it helps with so much of the middle of the movie, what's your favorite moment with the stepmom?
Actually, I think my favorite one comes, and it's a very small one, but I think it comes right after what you were just talking about. They're like positioned there, and she has her hand on like one girl's wrist and her other on one woman's forehead, and then Jackie's in another room, and Fei Hung, and he picks up like 2 tiles of money and goes, "Whose money is this?" And then all of a sudden it's this quick cut, and she's like full sprint, and
oh my god,
it happens so fast, but it's so
Yep.
It's like comedic gold. She grabs the money through the wall basically, and then is back like positioned perfectly within just seconds, and it was hysterical and beautiful. I loved that.
I think I liked her whole gag sequence that she had whenever she was like talking about being pregnant, being a child.
Good lord.
And then the father was just taking it so seriously and was like
Yes.
concerned about her, and then every once in a while she's just like, yeah, whatever.
Just that right later on in that chain of gags, that like she attempts to jump, and like the dad has to keep catching her so she doesn't fall and potentially harm the baby. It was so much.
Well, it was just,
so good.
I watched because we talked about Police Story last week, and then I watched the second Police Story. She's just such a different character from the female characters that we've had in Wheels on Meals and Police Story. Because you know, I love Maggie Chung, but she is just this kind of somewhat damsel in distress at times in the Police Story movies. And the stepmother character in this is so independent, and you know, so you know, she's constantly being able to kind of create her own moments. It was something very different and something very refreshing compared to the other movies.
Yeah, I mean, she is a full character and is hysterical and acts of her own volition, and seems by all means to be smarter than her husband.
Yeah, I mean, and what is it when Jackie's fighting, or you know, when she's egging him on, that there's like this, you're pretty sure she could probably kick his ass too. I mean, there's that moment where the Master Fu, the director character, the one who's getting the MacGuffin, shows up, and she immediately is like, I'm going to wreck this dude. No, get out of my way. And then of course the dad shows up. It's like, oh no, please help, because you know, whatever, she's not supposed to be fighting because she's pregnant. That, I mean, even later on, that she makes fun of that she's about to go storm off with them to go fight the British people in the factory. You know, whatever, they keep her from going, but at first she's like, what condition? I'm only pregnant That is really funny. And in that moment before where Master Fu shows up to get the jade stamp, that it's like she gets when they're all about to go in and Jackie's whatever asking about this guy or lauding about Master Fu is like, if that man was important, would he go around hitting women? That like, and she's like, think about it. That it's to your point, Zach, that it I don't know whose decision this was or who's on the writing side helped flesh out this character, including the actress, but like it is, considering the movies as you said that we've talked about for the series, and even before then, other movies that Jackie was in as the star, this is a particular surprising comedic foil, right? Like she plays both straight man and also subversive instigator. So
the last point I kind of wanted to hit on before we wrapped up is this kind of feels like a perfect kind of bridge between Jackie's Hong Kong efforts and American efforts, because after this we're going to kind of dig into we're going to dig into at least one of the main American effort that he did with the Rush Hour series, and then a more international one. But we talked a little bit in the notes area where this came out in 1994 but was released in America in 2000, was kind of redone, and because of that I feel like it has that feeling of being very inundated with Western, the music, the editing style, some of it feels very much like an American production at times compared to something like Police Story or Wheels on Meals. Did you guys catch any of that? Did you feel like it kind of felt like this mix of his Hong Kong efforts and his American efforts, like it was this kind of transition piece?
I think you're onto something there. I think the editing for sure feels more like an American action movie would. Like you don't get the repetitive shots or not, and repetitive in a good way. Like in Police Story, there's so many times where they'll show you the same move from a different angle right afterwards, and it's wonderful. But you don't really get that here in this movie, I don't think. Do you? I don't think so.
Not as much.
There's not the same kind of playback feeling,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think. I mean, there's the time in the fire, but that's like literally shot at a different angle where he's like scurrying around the coals. So, I mean, that's just like, you brought that up last week in Police Stories. Like, this is like one take, so we're going to get as many angles as we can get, and we're going to edit that shit together because we're not going to make him do that again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I know the music specifically was done. Who did the music? It wasn't. I was surprised because it had an American or British name on it when I was watching the credits go by in this movie, but I cannot find it right now. But it didn't have like that same synth soundtrack as Police Story, which, I mean, to be fair, this is like more of a period piece, I guess.
That was one of the things, was that when they brought it to America, they redid the musical score. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right, that makes a lot more sense. And yeah, I mean, this and a lot of the movies that Someone Hung has up on Amazon that got carted over, I guess, by Miramax. I don't know who did the dubbing specifically, but there's like, my annoyance with Amazon right now is like those movies only have the English dub on it, so you have no choice.
Yeah.
In the matter. But
yeah, we talked a lot about that with Wheels on Meals because it's so
right.
bad, the English dub.
But so, I mean, to your point about this being like a bridge movie, right? That this is, I'm not sure if I could point to, considering like the subject is anti-colonialist in some way, that I think it's funny that this is supposed to be a bridge movie as like a statement. But I mean, clearly all these movies get like picked up wholesale to then put on the market or whatever in the 90s with the redubbings and everything else. So I'm not sure what to make of that, you know, making it more palpable for the Western audience, being specifically like making sure that the dubs are there so that they don't have to like spend their time thinking about the subtitles. But I mean, even to our point, whether or not how goofy the actual plot is and how much we actually need to be paying attention to the subtitles, that I mean, you can honestly probably follow the action and get a clear sense of what the dynamics going on in this movie is, right? I mean, Jackie Chan makes the dynamics as clear, like all his collaborators, like the costuming and everything else, like it is very clear the hostilities in this movie. So I mean, even from before making like intentional efforts maybe to reach a Western audience, that there's a clearly like I don't want to say vivid, it's not quite, but maybe like salient storylines that make it very clear that even if you get bogged down by the narrative that it's trying to tell, that it's like clear who the bad guy and good guys are, more or less, right? That you can follow that, especially with this one, with the costuming and everything else that we've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that we talked a little bit about in Wheels on Meals kind of how his style of movie translates to an American audience, just because, like I talked about, I think I've opened with every movie so far in the series that it is this kind of parade of nonsense for so long. But this one, I think, especially feels much more like it feels built on a studio. Like it feels much more like there is some money behind it. And so even if you have that kind of nonsense plot kind of rolling around at the first, hour or so of the movie, I think that the fact that it does have this polished quality to it, because you have this period piece, it seems very period centric. It's always kind of playing into that note. I think that polished quality kind of adds to validating it for an international audience. It doesn't feel like Police Story, as great as it is, kind of has this almost DIY effect to it. I mean, I don't know. It seems like it's a little bit scrapped together, and I think that's probably a little bit. I think that maybe just turns off international audiences.
Yeah, I could see that.
Which, I mean, that's an interesting point, because I mean, depending on how you walk down that thread, that would make Police Story seem like it has more clear character to its time and place, right, than trying to make a narrative and a polished product that it would appease and entice a Western audience, right? Like the roughness of Police Story can make it feel more special and unique than the really hard refined craft of this one. But I mean, I say that loving both of those movies, so it's like, I those are like quibbles of thought and narrative, as opposed to actually sitting and watching it for myself, that is.
Yeah, that's fair, but I think in terms of this as a transition, it is kind of an easier one to start with if you've never seen one of his non-American movies. I think, at least. This is, I guess, probably the first one I saw a few years ago, and I really liked it. And then Police Story is a bit of a tougher animal still, even though I love action movies and have seen a handful of Hong Kong action movies and stuff like that. It's still a little tougher, even though I find it great.
Yeah. The comedy's pitched so well in Drunken Master, right? That it's like, that is like mostly the propulsive force until we get to that point in the factory, right, where that plot really kicks in and puts him in an incinerator. that comedy is just like there. So it's like that. I can see that being like, regardless of talking about actual polish, but just jokes carting you along, that it's a lot easier to watch. And the stepmom character helps a lot. So
it does. Any final notes before we wrap up on Drunken Master?
It's gonna be weird going to America, right?
Yeah.
It's gonna be an interesting transition, just judging from the kind of dynamics of the Jackie character with whoever his kind of secondary person is, and moving to Rush Hour, which is very singular with Jackie and Chris Tucker. And that's really I'm excited to kind of revisit that, because that was really my entrance into Jackie Chan's, because I watched the Rush Hour movies. And so now, after watching so many of the Hong Kong movies, I'll be curious to see how this plays now.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah, I'll
probably.
tell you one interesting thing is you said this wasn't released in the US till 2000.
Right.
And Rush Hour, I think, was 98.
Yeah, it was earlier.
So sure. That's kind of interesting.
Because, I mean, I guess that's supposed to be his actual breakout, right? The one that really pushed him
because
over the edge
he
of
was
the
in
American
America.
audience.
We talked about it a little bit last year, but he clearly was kind of making plays in America, but it wasn't working. But Rush Hour, I think, was the first one that really broke him out as like a name that people recognized.
Which is funny, considering at least part of what Chris Tucker is doing and his character is just like, holy shit, look at what Jackie Chan's doing in front of me. So, I mean, I guess another bridge film is just like literally being in awe of Jackie moving.
To be fair, that's how I watch all of these movies, so I relate to that.
Yeah.
Right. Audience surrogate,
Definitely.
to be sure.
Well, that will wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter at handle @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we post all the movies that we talked about in this episode. Next week, we will be talking about Rush Hour 2. I'm not going to be talking about the first Rush Hour. We're going to talk about Rush Hour 2, which came out in 2001, so a year after the American release of Legend of Drunken Master. So be sure to come back for that. We have a lot of good stuff right now on the website. I really recommend, we've been going through our best of 2018. We have best comedies, blockbusters, and within this past week we did foreign films. For those listening to this the week after this is released, we'll have best hidden gems, which will wrap up our best of the 2018 lists on the website. But we also have some new release reviews. We have a review of Glass, the new M. Night Shyamalan movie by Nathan Smith. We also have what Andrew Swafford called one of the angriest reviews on Cinematary.com, which is Logan Kinney talking about Bohemian Rhapsody, the new Best Picture nominee at the Oscars. It's a fiery one. It was a good one. Both his and the Glass review by Nathan's are fantastic, so please check those out on Cinematary.com. Until next week, thank you guys for listening. We'll see you then.